after. Okay, so generally setup wise, Dan's looking good. I think grip pressure possibly could be a little bit loose. I had a few sort of when I was sort of getting the feel of the arms and hands coming down, there's a little bit of tension there, but most of the time it's not too bad. Okay, setup on the left down one, I say is good. Takeaway now, before that club's even gone back, probably sort of waist high or hip height, you've got that right leg kind of like moving back quite a bit. And at this point here now, I'd say your right knee's almost sort of locking out. There's a lot of hip turn there for the swing you're trying to make there. Okay, so now before the arms start coming down, that knee has got to start moving back to where it needs to be. Well, now the arm's already starting to transition. Now trying to move left, you can't do it. And there's this sort of impact. If we sort of take a middle of that, that's probably your hand position there at impact, roughly speaking. So behind the ball, a bit flicky, a bit thinny, or a bit high. Either way, okay? Could go high left, could go high right, could go thin, could be even fat. I mean, your low point could be a bit behind the golf ball, catch it a bit heavy, okay? So we want to try and feel the flex in that right knee. So as the club starts moving back now, that right knee movement, a little bit quiet. And at no part in this swing do I think that right leg looks like it's locking out so much, okay? It's a little bit quieter. So when you're here now, your first move is your left pocket there can start moving. As the arms start going, the left hip now goes to that yellow line, you see. So you move into that left side more. And the next frame now, there's impact. Take a blur from your middle of your hands there.
Just.
That's good. That's fine. Yeah. Doesn't have to be. The thing is, we don't want it over here. And the thing with golf is there's a sweet spot, okay? As in with a golf club, where your hand position is, where the club face is pointing. People who slice the ball, their face is open. Well, it's not a question of if the club face is closed, that's good. Well, no, that's going to go left now. If you're scooping the ball, your hands are behind the ball. Yeah, but having the hands kind of over here is no good. We want to kind of get it in sort of the old Goldilocks effect, so it's kind of somewhere in there. There is always too far back, too far forward, but where you were there, I think that's decent. I mean, that was the one that was 26.6, which is kind of the numbers we're looking for, and that is going to help you get your angle of attack a bit more that way. So ball then turf, not turf then ball, or no turf ball and thin. But your body just generally moving to the left, and then when you're to swing through on this one now, okay, you can just swing through and your arms will just sort of finish it. It doesn't look too exaggerated, like that sort of sawn off kind of position. Because if you start, if the lower half or the right hip, should we say, goes back, that's sort of lock in there with your leg, you see that sort of right leg looks like, if your hips have turned that much, generally now you're going to be too far behind you, a bit too sort of around the body. Your path into the golf ball now is going to be too much from this angle, yeah? So if you try and shaft it, you're going to shove your hands out, you're going to get the old unmentionables and the ball's going to ping off the heel there. Because you're coming from here, just sort of pushing your arms out. You're trying to, like almost like a cricket shot, yeah?
Shot,
so if the lower half can be a bit quieter, the club can then stay in front of you. Now you can shift and move this way, we get to that. If you go like this, and now we get shaft lean, you're just blocking out there. And in some ways, you almost got to just flick the club, club back to the golf ball. With 6, 5, 4 irons and hybrids and drivers, if you're back here, it's not a bad thing to potentially be. I'm not saying we have two different swings, but if a swing fault is too much this hip turn, it'll affect itself more in the short irons because you want the irons to be more kind of this way, as you do with the longer clubs. But that movement could be kind of masked a little bit, and you get away with things. The same way if you were swinging the golf club too steep, for example, your wedges, you'd be coming across the ball. With a wedge, you get pretty much like a steep divot. It might cut a little bit left to right, but not much. Take a driver and you're just slicing the ball 40 yards offline. So swing tendencies kind of fluctuate depending on which club is benefited by it. So you might be too steep, generally favour the shorter clubs. Too shallow, too flat, too far behind you will generally favour the longer clubs. There's always different sort of shot types, so we say, that we're going to get in an ideal. And this is why a lot of golf, when they play golf, think, oh, my drive was awesome, great, I putted really well. Couldn't hit a bloody green. Or the next, my irons were just so good. I 6 greens in regular in the front 9, but then couldn't hit a fair on the back 9, 1 green regulation, and my putting was awful as well. Okay, great. And then it's like, well, then my chipping's really good. And so it's always that kind of, I mean, I think I've played in the same before, like 35 years of playing golf. I've probably had about 7-8 rounds of golf where everything's clicked. Where the club's in a pretty good spot. I know where the club is and where the ball's going to go, and we're driving my iron, playing my bunker, playing my putting, my wedges are all good. And that's been the sort of half dozen rounds I've played where I've shot the best scores of my life. And there's few and far between, unfortunately. But when your game's not quite clicking on all cylinders, you have to do the best you can to try to manage your game that day, knowing that, okay, my driver's not so good today. Okay, I need 3-wood or hybrid. Okay, or some days my wedges are awful. Okay, I'm going to start attacking holes and try and knock it on the greens. I know for a fact if I got a 340 yard par 4, my wedges are awful, I'm trying to go to the green. Get as close as I can so I can just chip it on there with a little wedge. If my driving's awful, I'm laying back with a wedge. Like, or laying back to a wedge, so I'm at 120 yards. So you play a whole based in some ways on what your game is feeling at, And that's just managing the conditions. It'll vary from day to day with the way you're swinging, the weather conditions, the ground conditions. All these things are going to come into that in terms of what decision you make on every given shot. So when someone says, what club are you taking here? Hybrid. Why? It's always a hybrid. But it isn't always a hybrid. You drive a car on the motorway, what speed do you go? 70. Some days you have to go 30 because it's down in rain and there's like lorries everywhere, or it's blowing a gale or whatever and stuff. And so you manage the conditions and the situation you're in and decide what you're going to do. But if your lower half is locking back, if you look at the sort of length of backswing you had on there, you can see how much there's a bit more daylight there between that one there and that one there. That just looks like that leg's locked and the hips turned too much for me.
Almost overdone what we talked about last time.
Exactly, yeah. Where we said last lesson, he said, was I turning well enough? And I was like, yeah, you're pretty good. On occasions, the bad shot, I didn't quite turn enough. When you didn't turn enough with the 5-wood on the third, what happened? He was like, where's that come from? Like a horrific shot way out to the right. So everybody's got their own kind of bad shots you're going to get. Okay, mate? So yeah, lower half is still turning. It's turning less and later, but it's not just going, I'm not going to turn.
It's like letting the body start the back.
Yeah, so basically there's a philosophy that is what's his face, Pete Cowan's about this sort of the spiral staircase. So your top half starts to swing and it goes round and it goes round and it just keeps going down and then it starts and then it winds back up again. So you start the top half of this thing and the lower half and then that way. So you sort of go down the spiral staircase and back up the spiral staircase. Okay, mate? Have a couple more that way, so we get that launch angle down to 26 something kind of consistently without just thinning it. Okay, mate?